It's another episode. Welcome back, Sales Beast listeners. We've got the Dylan Suitor on the call with us today. Our first interview was with Dylan, and now we're so honored to welcome him back 2 years after we really kind of started this podcast to get a recap, see where he's at, and also hear about some really exciting stuff. So Dylan, welcome back to Sales Beast.
Thanks so much, guys. I'm so happy to see you're both still doing this and committed to it. And I'm sure you've gotten lots of success from it and met a lot of cool people. So it's awesome to be back, and we got a lot of fun stuff we'll cover over the last couple of years.
Definitely. Now, we had Nickey Calford on the podcast about a month or so ago. She was on the listing side or on the sales side of a $10 million investment property. And one of the reasons that we wanted to bring you on is because you were on the buyer side of it. So why don't we dive into that? Tell us a little bit about what happened there, and we'll go from there.
It was actually one of those episodes I listened to, and I sent a message to both of you, actually. And I was like, do you want the other side of the story? And it's very similar. Nickey was great to deal with, and it was a lot of fun. I saw that building, and she reached out, and I don't even know how it came about, but she reached out with the LOI thing, sign the LOI and or sign the NDA and get access to the documents and the files. And it was a deal that I had never seen before. Something I never knew what to do. And another agent on my team also signed it and wanted to get the information and was talking to me about it. And then when you looked at the actual idea of the deal, because of the grant, we basically had to buy it in cash. The mortgage that was available on it was like $2 million of the 10 million. So you had to come up with $8 million to close. And so I didn't know how that would possibly be possible. But when you looked at the actual value of the building 17 and 22 years from now, so that grant policy or whatever, then that comes off. And if you increase rents to market rents, you can do something called a discounted cash flow evaluation on the value of the property. And so I had to get a couple of different appraisals. One, which is a market value appraisal, which is dictated based upon the buyer that's buying that. But then we also do a discounted cash flow appraisal. And so that discounted cash flow appraisal shows the building, when these grants come off at market value, could be somewhere between $40 and $100 million. So we're looking at an asset that we could purchase now, which is mainly cash. And these assets are normally named after the buyer's children. And as Nickey mentioned, the sellers, one of the sellers wanted to sell, the other one didn't. And the one that wanted to sell had a personal reason for wanting to sell, because most of the time these things don't change hands. Once they've been built and they get that grant, they don't change hands. So it was a really interesting experience for myself and my cousin to kind of dig into and see where these are available. And one of my mortgage brokers, it's actually his uncle that works in the city. So I had a quick conversation with him. He connected the dots and recognized what it was. And he's like, I can't go any further. I'm not allowed, and didn't. So I haven't talked to him again since that first conversation with him. But he had mentioned, like, these things do exist. London doesn't do this anymore. So now London keeps all of their grants in-house for built by London, so they can maintain those units, because the problem is they're growing so fast, they don't have enough affordable housing for those who need it. And so they're trying to acquire as much as they can, but they can't, because affordable housing is disappearing. So now they started building them in-house. And going through this process, I was able to recognize that we're not really going to make money on this thing until we can turn it over and turn it over and turn it over. So at the end of the day, I obviously represented myself and my cousin, and we ended up purchasing the property. And we did it in a way where my cousin was going to inject the capital, and he lives in Antigua with his wife and his couple of kids, and pretty much retired. His dad left him a bunch of money. So it was a really good joint venture partner for me to get into business with. And I'd only done one property with him before. It was his first investment property. And that's what I'm doing with David Belanger in St. Catharines, the 32 unit in St. Catharines. And we made a deal. We said, how are we going to make this work? He said, I'll put the cash in. We'll balloon the payments. So it's going to have an 8% interest. So he basically gets an 8% preferred share on everything. And after that 8% interest on the debt that he's injecting, it's 50-50 ownership afterwards. And so I ran the numbers on it. And if I don't make any payments for the 17 years, I have it at about $18 million worth of total debt on the property, but we do it free and clear, which would be really beneficial for him and not as beneficial for me. However, we have found a couple of different strategic ways to finance additional part of the project. And so when we closed on it, instead of assuming the mortgage, we actually closed it in cash. So we bought out the First National mortgage because it can only be bought out on transfer. So we transferred and we bought it out of that day. Otherwise, we had to wait 3 or 4 more years for it. We couldn't increase the loan. But now we're actually building out a business plan to the City of London, how it actually makes sense for us to put higher leverage on the building. Now it's not going to be 75 or 80%. It'll probably be somewhere between 50 and 60% loan to value of the property. But by digging in and speaking with the city and finding out what that process was like, I was actually able to then pull out an extra 3 or 4 million of that capital that I'd be deferring for 17 years. And we're going to lock into a 5-year CMHC loan. And at the end of that 5 years, we'll do an additional equity strip to be able to pull out as much of that 8 million that I can. So my plan would be, after 5.5, 6 years, my hope is that I can pay back most of that 8 million. And then from there on out, we don't have that debt looming over us that we initially bought into the project with. And then as the property gets closer and closer to turning over up to market rents and seeing the value of the property, then we'll be able to actually see the rewards of it. So it might make 100, 200 grand a year, but we'll just continue to invest that back into the debt so that we don't have anything from it. But we have this wonderful asset that was 7 years old or less with the renovations that were done to it, and 88 units that'll be forever a cash cow. So it's a long-term play. It's definitely a wealth play, and one that I probably won't be selling real estate at the time that I'm looking at the refinance or the buyout of it. But it was exciting. It's just the way you look at different deals and analyze different things can really change the perspective of what they can do for you.
So this particular deal, just so I know, it's the building has a grant that limits the amount you can increase the rent. I guess my question for you, when say someone that's living there now moves out, do you have the ability to move the rents up to market today?
No. So the grant program that was in place, there was initially one building that was 53 units. And so Nickey's clients bought the 53 units fully renovated with just that. So it was 53 units on a large lot. And it was under a grant policy where they said, we will give you most of the money to buy it as a grant. And it stays on there as a debt, but it's forgivable at the end of 25 years. So 25 years from now, that, let's call it $5 million, will just disappear if you follow these regulations. If you don't, you will owe it back. So the grant that was used to purchase the first property and like renovate, because it was 100 and some odd year old business, they gutted everything down to studs, completely replaced everything with this grant. So all the renovations were paid for by the City of London. In exchange, the City of London put a 25-year grant policy in place that they had the right to either rent it out, or you had to maintain 70% of CMHC market rents. So CMHC market rents are always low because they're always behind schedule, and they don't improve as much as true market rents do. So I think market rents on CMHC for these 1-bedrooms and these bachelors are like 900 to 1,100. So I have to keep rent at 70% of that or less. Now, additionally, what Nickey's clients did is they found highest and best use. If anyone knows me, they know that highest and best use is one of my favorite words, one of my favorite terms. And so they picked this large lot that has 53 units. They actually applied to the city to build as many as they could on another building. So they built a purpose-built rental within the grant parameters. They went way above what they had to. They put solar panels on the roof, and they have radiant in-floor heating. They've done a lot of really nice upgrades to this concrete building with underground parking. And the government actually funded the majority of the build in draws. So they gave enough to start it. And then as they were building, they gave draws for another 25-year term for those 35 units. So the City of London gave them the majority of the money required to make this building work. And in turn, the building would then offer 70% of market rents for the majority of units. Now, because they didn't want to be a government subsidized like stigma within the house or within the building, I think there's 4 or 5 units that are 80% of CMHC market rents, and there's 2 units that are actually market rent. So you can charge market rent and you can advertise as market rent, so it doesn't have that stigma about the building that everything's just subsidized rent and subsidized housing. So it's part of the idea and the concept that the city uses to ensure that we're not just like taking areas and turning them into strictly subsidized, and then those turn into bad areas. It's a way that we can kind of keep both. And so we have really good tenants throughout. That make sense? Can I clarify that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be over a lot of people's heads potentially. I got a question for you. When did I meet you? 4 years. 4 years ago.
When did you join McKay?
4 years ago.
Yeah.
At that time, I don't remember you as a real estate investor. over the last 4 years, how many houses have you acquired and how many doors have you acquired?
That number changes daily. I think I signed off on 6 or 7 more houses today. 3 months ago, mid 2021, I surpassed 500 doors. A goal of mine was to get to 1,000 doors this year. I won't hit that this year, but I will definitely hit it next year. And I think one of the things we're going to talk about was 2 years ago when we started this, what the goals were and what the goals are now. And I actually have them on the wall in front of me the same way I did them 2 years ago. A little bit more challenging to fill out at this point, but they're still fun and exciting. So I'm just surpassed 500 doors, and upon completion, which most of these properties should be complete, somewhere between 130 and 150 million worth of real estate.
That's a big change over 4 years.
It is.
One thing I would say about you that hasn't changed is you saw me when you came on the screen, my face lit up, and that's because of your energy and your positive attitude and your mindset. And that's not saying you have a big head, but your head thinks bigger than anyone I've ever met in my life. And it just lights up the room, and I'm grateful to have you in my life. That isn't any different than when I met you 4 years ago. Your portfolio is significantly bigger today than it was back then. But you're still you're still thinking big. How does anyone listening to this podcast get themselves into that mind state? I know you spend a lot of time working on it. You associate with a lot of big thinkers yourself. How do we get there?
So first off, I really appreciate the compliment. It's very, very kind of you, and it means a lot. And then I guess I'll come from a place of vulnerability. 2021 has been a challenging year for me, and finding a way to tie myself to consistently thinking bigger and pushing myself beyond has been a challenge. I still do, and I get out of bed and I push myself, but a lot of the routine that I got into 2 years ago that really motivated me and got me up and like made me push, it was to get ahead. It was to get further ahead. And a lot of it was out of necessity. I mean, not that I was scraping by any means, but like I wanted to be number one. I wanted to be successful. I didn't want to be number one because I wanted to beat other people. I want to be number one because I knew I had it in me to at least push myself to be the best and to be the best I can be. And I think I mentioned that 2 years ago, is like be the best that I can in the area, and then the city, and then the country, and then the company. And then it's like, when you've outdone everything, then what? Okay, well then be better than yourself. And I think I've come back to that now, where it's like, it's not about being better than anyone else. It's about being better than I was yesterday. If that means I end up at number 100 on the charts, or I have one property, or I have 50 properties, or 100 properties, whatever that may be. If it's the best that I'm doing and I'm pushing myself to be the best I'm doing, like there's really nothing that can get in your way of whatever you want to achieve. And so I think that it's been a very challenging year trying to nail down some of these goals. Like I've been looking at GPSs on my wall, or if I turn my computer, literally this blue wall behind me is all white paper all in front of me. And I look at it every day. And I goal set consistently. Like my team sometimes hate me because I'm like always goal setting. I got my high performance journal that I probably showed you 2 years ago, and I'm filling it out. I just started a new one, and I'm constantly putting notes into it. I'm actually going to create a journal. So I was talking to one of my team members, and he's like, "You need to create a journal. Like you promote this thing all the time." He's like, "We need to create it and make it yours and use your quotes and your lines." So we're going to do that. But I went back to it. These are like quarterly goals, and these are essentially like a 1-3-5 or a GPS I'm using Keller Williams, except it's like a 1-3-3. Your one big goal. Why is the goal important? What are your progress goals, and what are your action and tasks? And I think something that I never really appreciated as much as I have recently. When I rewrote this, it was September 7th that I actually filled this one out. So it was about 3 weeks ago. When you set these big goals, the fourth page of this says, "I blank commit to completing these goals by blank. And when I achieve those goals, my life will improve in the following ways." And I got really passionate about these things. And the reason it was September 7th instead of September 1st is because I wanted to make sure they were true and real. And it took a while to do that. And I know that I've filled these journals out as I've been going through the quarters, and it keeps me motivated and excited, but I hadn't reflected back on these the way I had in a while. And I also put down a goal for myself, like a target goal, something I'm excited about. It's like with what I'm doing and where I'm at, like if I want to go and join Tony Robbins, I join Tony Robbins. If I want to go on vacation, I go on vacation. Like I don't really have a whole lot of like, I have to earn that. Well, what was something that I wouldn't do otherwise? And so I actually put a goal that I want to go to the Super Bowl, and the Super Bowl is in LA this year or next year. And my team is the LA Rams. I'm a big football fan. So I didn't go to the Super Bowl last year because I felt like it was inappropriate and I was behind, I was busy in all these different businesses and I didn't really set a goal and want to do that. And Josh invited me to go and I was like, yes, I want to go. And then I looked at what I had on my calendar and I can't drop the ball for all those people that I'm helping and I'm serving by doing what we're doing every day. And so I said, you know what, I won't go. And I didn't. And now I'm like kicking myself because like I really should have gone. It would have been fun. But this year I know when the Super Bowl is and I can plan around that. And if I complete everything in my goals by December 31st, I'll book my ticket and go. And that gives me a month and a half to book it. I can definitely block off that week for myself if I do that. And so tying things back to your goal that you want personally, but also having that why, that big why. And when we speak about the end of 2018, where a lot of stuff changed for me, I read the book, Find Your Why, on the way back from Mega Camp. And I was really inspired from Mega Camp. And I read the book, Find Your Why, and I skipped half of it because the first half, well, part of it is about you and then part of it's about your organization. And I really, truly should go back and reread the organizational part because at that point in time in 2018, it was all about me. I had to pour into myself first. I had to improve myself first. I had to be the best version of myself because at that time, I didn't really have anyone else to do it for. And I went and I met with my TL at the time, Donna Beach, and she helped me find my why, which really lived on throughout, especially through 2019 and even now, which is to inspire others through success to think bigger and live their endless potential. And so a lot of what I do now at this point in time, when I speak or I talk about it, it's not about that I've accomplished it. It's about when you say, hey, when did I meet you? And you didn't have that portfolio. And how can someone get there? How can someone do that? And it's like, it's the belief that you can be there. It's having a purpose. It's setting goals consistently. It's doing the things that other people don't to get the results that other people won't. And that's truly what it comes down to. It's sitting there and listen to ESO a couple of days ago. Gary Keller lead generates every day. Does he have to? Absolutely not. He runs $1 billion company. He's a billionaire, but he still lead generates every single day for talent. He still lead generates every single day for off-market opportunities. He still lead generates every single day for joint venture opportunities for his people, so he can continue to provide and give and lead. And I think that's what leadership really comes down to, is it's you continue to do the things even though you may not necessarily want to at times, but you look at them in a way that are positive and what need to happen, because that's what has to happen for you to continue to inspire and lead. And leadership can be, I don't know, a little lonely at times, and pushing yourself and doing things that may not necessarily be the most exciting at times, but they'll provide a really positive impact on a lot of people. That's really what life's all about. And if you're not pushing yourself beyond the limits and beyond breaking points at certain times, then you're kind of living an average. And it goes back to that old adage where you're either green and growing or you're ripe and rotting. So it's like you either push yourself to grow and be better every single day, or you're slowly going to wither away. And I look at where I'm at now and it's like, well, I could just not do those goals and I could just coast, and I could probably figure out a way to enjoy it for a couple of weeks or a month, but afterwards you lose purpose. And when you look at some people that are, I don't know, there's all kinds of stories, and Miracle Morning is one that comes to mind, where it's like the mind can overcome a lot of things, and even against a lot of adversity, when you really think about where you want to be, you can get there if you commit to it and you're motivated by it and you have a purpose behind it. So going back to your original question, which is how does someone get there? I think they need to tie themselves to something bigger than them. They need to also make sure that it's serious and something they care about. They need to reward themselves with it. And then they need to really find their purpose on paper, as Donna calls it, or find your big why, or however you want to look at it, that may not be as cliche that you can tie it to and not think that it's just airy fairy, and it's something you truly believe in.
Mic drop. I think we did this last time. You just gave like a massive speech and both of us just had no idea what to say. But Mike, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, obviously you're extremely fast moving. You are a leader. You run a team. I check KW Connect every month. I've seen how much money you make. It's a shitload. Good for you. I am very proud of you. Is it tough for the people in your world, I'm thinking specifically the people on your team, to keep that pace and move as quickly as you do, or do they rise to the occasion and hang on to I heard Jeff Glover say this before, like people can hang on to the wing of my airplane. I'm going so fast. They're going to end up in a very good place at the end of the day. Are the people in your organization hanging on to that wing? And have you seen a lot of progress in the last, say, 2 years since you really started to hone in on building out this team?
I almost feel like you're asking for a friend. No, I feel like what you're kind of saying is it's something that you're living and you're dealing with. And if I'm speaking to a greater question, I think there's a couple of answers that I can share. But
something I can shed some light on it, because I'm a very fast moving leader, and every day I wake up and say, how do I continue to be relevant in his life? And that's Sandy. He moves very fast. If I don't keep pace, eventually I will become irrelevant. So I wonder if the people in your organization think that way also, and are they moving faster as a result of your speed?
So I think that's really up to them. And what I've recognized is that through life and through everything I've done, I mean, KWIP was a huge piece of my world and my life, and I moved really fast there, and people joined on and hopped on that wing, as you mentioned, with Jeff Glover, and they got to places that they may not have otherwise, or they got to places that they didn't know were possible and didn't may not have pushed themselves to that because they didn't know what's possible and real. And so I think where I look at it is, I never want to look at like leaving someone behind. I mean, John Maxwell mentions like you're climbing a mountain and you're going up and you're going up and you're exhausted. So you get off, and then you get off at this point in the mountain. And then some people that were with you, they just don't get back on. And then you keep climbing up the mountain, and then you get off, and then you get back on. And like certain people fall off at all times. And I think what really comes down to ensuring that you can provide an environment, a culture, and a community that people can live where they want to live and be happy in. You need to layer things. I mean, there's going to be people like yourself that stay with Sandy and stick with it and run with it and keep up and keep pace as best you can. But then there's also people in your world that, because Sandy's leading and growing and pushing, that are going to latch onto you because you're the inspiration and you're the person that they can truly relate to at that time. And there's going to be some people that listen to this podcast that are like, I just got my real estate license, or I just started last week. How can I possibly do that? Or some of these numbers I'm throwing out, like, some of these things can be really daunting and scary, but when you're interviewing on a weekly basis, monthly basis, whatever these are for these podcasts, and people hear your story and they hear about what you're doing, it's like you haven't not accomplished things. Like, you've accomplished quite a bit yourself, my friend, and you're that living proof that people can jump on, but they don't all have to jump on the exact same plane. It's almost like instead of hopping on the wings of the plane and there's only one plane, it's like, okay, well, if planes kept jumping on the wings of planes, then it can kind of layer down and it's available to everyone. And that's really what KWIP was all about. Like, we talk about pyramid schemes, we talk about the corporate ladder. And it's like, corporate ladder is not designed for people to like not be able to earn as much or not do as much, but it's like over the years of advancement and growth and leadership. Like, I remember when I was in my 20s, I was like, I can do what those people can just because I'm 20, and underestimate me, challenge me. Okay. And I would push myself to do the best I can, but I look back and I'm like, you stupid 20-year-old. Like, look at where I'm at now, where I'm at there. Like, you've made some really dumb decisions. And it's like, those dumb decisions were what we learned from. Those are the things that we grow because of. So there are absolutely people in my organization that push me every single day. And that I know that if I call and sometimes you have to understand their personality. Some of them I have to call and be like, you sold one house last week. Awesome. There's others. It's like, you sold one house last week. What are you thinking? Like, you think you can go away now? And there's different ways to communicate and talk to certain people on the team because certain people take it different ways. And I'm the child of a stepfather that told me when I got a 98 in math, what happened to the 2%? And then my sister came in with a 60 or a C on a paper, and he was like, let's go to dinner, party. I'm sitting there, I'm like, what am I missing? And what I recognized later in life was that it wasn't a matter of, oh, she got a 60 and I got a 98 and I'm getting scolded. It was a matter of, he knew that I could do better. And my sister worked her butt off to get that 60 or that C at that time. And she would spend 2-3 hours on homework every single day because that was her best. He was just pushing her to be the best that she could be. And it's not all about being the absolute best at anything. It's about being the best that you can be for yourself or for those around you. And if the best that you can be is a different earning bracket or a different leadership capacity or giving back in certain ways, and you're giving it 110% all the time, and you're happy with that, I'm 100% going to slow that plane down and make sure that we can bring you along. But if I find that you're not pushing yourself every day and that you're just being lazy or you're ignoring certain things that I know you can do better, those are those people that I do get on and I do push harder and I do challenge. And it's like, you'll hear from some of the people on my team. One guy came on, he's like, oh, I'll flip a house in my first year. And then I was like, why a house? He's like, okay, I'll buy a building. And I was like, congratulations, why one? He's like, fine, I'll buy 3. And he did that on camera and he shared it. And then the next day he's like, that's going to be live in front of all my friends. I can't fail now. And so I had to find a way to tie that back to a purpose. And his biggest thing in his world is his son. And so he's naming a corporation after his son. So it's his son's name, Inc. And so I just walked downtown and it's like, you look at those big buildings. It's like, what if you put your son's name at the top of that? And when you tie a purpose to what the outcome they're looking for, or they want, or what they're doing it because of, his entire world has changed in the last 8 months because all I do is keep talking about that. His goals are 5-10 times greater than anyone else on the team in his first year in real estate. They're 10 times greater than mine were in my first year. I'm never going to tell him he can't do it. I'm just going to push him every single time he wants to ensure he's hitting those numbers or doing those things, and he appreciates the push and comes back for more abuse. And it's like, you're doing that with Sandy as well. Like you came in from Nova Scotia and you didn't know anyone. And you're like, oh, I heard this guy at a podcast. You got your real estate license. You moved to Hamilton and you cold call people. I mean, your story isn't all glamorous and like, oh, I'm the son of the best realtor in the city that had a bunch of business and I just took it over. No, you started from grassroots. You built it entirely yourself. And Sandy's grit and determination and belief in you and confidence in you created what is now a leader in an organization that is doing really, really well. And that comes from that grit and that commitment, and for you being the best that you can be and doing it not just for yourself, but also because you were like, someone else poured into me and gave me energy and time and effort, and they knew I could be more, and I'm going to be more, and I'm going to do it for myself. I'm going to do it for them, and I'm going to do it for everyone else around me that deserves and requires what I had from him. And I think I've had a number of people in my world that have done that for me, where they didn't have a reason or a purpose to talk to me. There was no reason they should have spent time on me. I was just an immature 20-year-old that I just told you about. And they did. And they gave me time, or they gave me energy because they saw a future that I didn't quite see because they had lived before me and they'd done it before me. And R&D, rip off and duplicate and walk that path that's been made for you. We're in 2021. And if you think you're going to recreate it, or you're going to create a bunch of brand new ideas, I guarantee you almost all of them have been created. It's just a matter of doing them better than what someone else can do, or it's adding more value to people around you. And it's doing it because you have a passion. You could offer the exact same service, be much more passionate about it. And you could think about it a different way and be optimistic about it versus pessimistic about it, and have a positive attitude about it. Be like, I'm going to cold call, and get excited about it. Or like, I'm going to go knock on doors. This person slammed the door in my face, but the next one will be happy. Oh, that person slammed the door in my face, but the next person will be happy. And you're consistently telling yourself that because you will find someone that's going to say yes, and they're going to sell their house, and you're going to help someone. You're going to help a buyer, and you're going to be loving it.
Okay. So on that note, I have a question to kind of deviate a little bit. Those were all amazing, amazing points. And I want to ask, you mentioned vulnerability a little while ago. And I think that's actually been like a theme of my year, like being vulnerable and allowing like the walls to break down. Two-prong question. How do you use vulnerability to lead your people? You've got such a massive world now, from co-elevation to your team, to your investment partners, everyone around you. Like, how do you use vulnerability? And then how, as a leader, do you simplify the vision for those around you to help them get there faster?
So let's go one step at a time.
Yes. I just didn't want to forget it.
So then write it down and remember it so that I don't forget it. So number one is vulnerability, and talk about vulnerability. And I think that I can start off by saying, on that same ESO program, there was another Gary quote, and it was like, being a leader is standing at the front of the room and casting a vision, and then going to the back of the room, rolling up your sleeves and taking on a job. And when you ask about vulnerability, like, the only way that a brand new agent that's 20, I use the word 20 because I've been using it throughout this, I'll keep it, but taking an individual that's 20 that just got their real estate license and being able to relate them to what I'm currently doing right now, the only possible way to do that is to share in some of the failures. Because you'll have someone that'll go knock on doors, they'll knock on 10 doors and they'll be like, oh, I got no every time. Like, you're just better than me at it. But it's like, no, maybe I knocked on 500 doors before I got that lead. Or maybe I literally almost went bankrupt. If it wasn't for the fact that I refused to go bankrupt, I would have gone bankrupt. And my business partner at the time, which we're still business partners, if it wasn't for him and it wasn't for the faith and the belief that we had in one another, that we were going to get through some of the investment portfolio that we've done, we would have lost it at 4. And here we are sitting 2-3 years later. And I mean, he's going to be actually pretty close to 1,000 doors this year. And it doesn't come because, oh, he just woke up one day and he bought a bunch of properties and it was really super easy. And that's what a lot of people want to see. That they want me to say, oh, well, no, we just got to 500 doors because I just thought big and went out and bought a bunch of properties and I just talked to people the right way. And I was a really good salesperson. Well, no, like we were dragged through the mud. We had bills that were bouncing. We had mortgages that were bouncing. We had lenders that were like, we're not giving you any more money. You're going to lose it all. And you're a house that's on fire. We're just going to let you burn. We were the ones that had to consistently go after it. I called 150 mortgage brokers and lenders to find capital. And the day we were going to lose everything, I got a $350,000 mortgage that was able to get put in place to pay off the debts that we did to buy us another week. And it's like, it's sharing those moments where truthfully, they happen to everyone. And it's the way you react and it's the way you take them. It's the way you handle them that will make you. Right before we got on this call, right when we got on this call, I told you that 2 days ago, that 88 unit apartment building that I bought off of Nickey flooded. The 4th floor terrace flooded. I got videos of people panicking and freaking out. There was a river going through the hallway on the 4th floor. Well, the 4th floor all the way down to the parking garage are flooded. This is a building that's 7 years old. I have absolutely no idea what the outcome is going to be. I don't know if insurance is going to cover it. I don't know what the cost is going to be to repair it. And more importantly, there's elderly people living in that building that I don't know if they have tenant insurance. So the mountain that I'm going to have to climb to ensure that those people are taken care of and to make sure that that building gets back on its feet, it's going to be costly. There's going to be a learning curve to it. But I have to look at the bigger picture and say, at the end of this, I know it's going to be okay. And at the end of this, I know it's all going to work out. And by constantly having that positive attitude and reaffirming it for yourself, it's the only way you're going to get through some of the challenging times. And being vulnerable and sharing some of that stuff. It was the same night that I got that. I missed 7 phone calls. 6 of them were from the property manager trying to get a hold of me to say, emergency, emergency. The other one was from that agent that I just mentioned to you that has that big goal for his son. And his comment to me was, I got a problem. Can you help me? And I didn't even mention the building piece, but he knows all about it afterwards. And he was like, this came up on my building that I bought, and there's a problem here, here, and here. What do I do? And I was like, well, you do this, this, and this, and you know what you need to do. Just go do it. And I was like, and just so you know, to make you feel better, because he's like, I can't sleep. This is keeping me up. I'm not going to sleep tonight. And I was like, I just found out that there was a flood through my 88 unit apartment building. I'll send you the photos right now. And there's probably 24 to 35 units that are complete guts. And I have no idea if insurance is going to cover it or not. And I'm going to sleep like a baby tonight, because I know when I wake up tomorrow, there's going to be something that we can do to make it right and help the people that are there. And it's going to work out. And he went to bed that night and slept like a baby. And the next day we laughed about it. And it's still a problem. I mean, I'm not saying it's done and over with, but those are the way that when you're vulnerable and acknowledge it head on and deal with it head on, that's really what can inspire and turn into an inspirational story. I mean, life is going to continue. Life is going to go on. It's an apartment building. It's repairable. Losing your life isn't. So how do you consistently think positively? Because I could let that stress get to me and have a heart attack, or I could continue. I'm not useful to anyone if I have a heart attack, but if I continue to move forward on it and think of how I can make it work, there's going to be a solution that'll get us through.
Do you think it's also because you've allowed yourself to get into so many uncomfortable situations that typically people don't put themselves into, that's allowed you to now be able to sleep well, because you know that you have the resources, you have the wits and like the willingness to fix everything that's happening right there?
It started from the beginning. I mean, I bought a property from my parents helped me buy a house at 18, and they gave me the 20% down and they co-signed on it. And I was responsible for all income and all expenses. And at the end of that summer, or the beginning of that summer, I had spent all of rent on bottle service at clubs and prime rib, because I love to eat well and go out and enjoy my time at university. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, I can't make my mortgage payment. My mom looked at me and she said, that's your problem, not mine. Go figure it out. And then after that property, I took the 60 grand or whatever I made in 5 years on that, which is peanuts now in a world that we live in, being a primary residence. And what I think was $200,000 in Waterloo that I bought that house for. It's probably like $1 million now. And that was, I don't know, 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And I took that 60 grand and I spent it all on debt, and I had no money. And then I walked into a condo. I put $5,000 down, and they needed $5,000 a month for the next 6 months for a new build condo. I didn't have it, but I figured it out. I worked my butt off. I took 2 days of vacation that entire summer. And one was my girlfriend at the time's birthday, and one was my best friend's birthday. And other than that, I was this 18-year-old student working a summer job that was my own painting company. I worked every single day to ensure that I made those payments, because you do what you have to do. And that's how I was raised. And my mom instilled that with me in a very young age, where she worked 3 jobs. She didn't want to. She worked 20 hours a day and come home to feed me and get 20 minutes of sleep and go back to another job. And You do what you have to do if you truly want it. You want to give a better life to the people around you. You want a better life for yourself. You'll fight through and you'll find the way.
Do you place any boundaries around yourself? I've been in situations before where contractor needs money on this job, but this job is starting next week, needs money on that. And then I have to refi this one to pay this one. It's like, oh my God, there's a lot going on here. And I don't know if I have enough money to cover this. I look at my bank account, it's not much in there. But I'm confident I can figure it out. With that being said, I have a line I won't cross. And that line, as I mature and grow, it moves. And over time, I can handle more and more and more and more. Is there a place where you say, no, this is as much as I can handle at this particular moment, or do you just keep going and say, I'll figure it out?
So I would say that when I was younger, I was entrepreneurial and I kept going and I'd figure out. And recently I've moved from E to P and I'm purposeful. And I remember going back to that painting company in my second or third year of running it. And I talked to someone who was like, when I have $25,000 in my bank account, I panic. And I was sitting there going like, oh my God, negative. It'd be nice to be at zero. And it's like, you're living off of debt at that point in time. And so as I grew and grew through it, it's like, well, if I had 5,000 in my bank account, that'd be comfortable. And if I had 10,000, that'd be comfortable. And here's a way to really connect to some listeners that may be brand new. They may be going into debt to get the real estate license or buy their first property. Right. And so at this point in time, I think there's a threshold that you'll pass, and it's going to be different for everyone, that at some point in time, you'll hit that threshold where you can't just go in your bank account and make it, where you can't just go and sell 5 houses and replace it. Like, you will hit a point. Like, I can't possibly pay back some of the debts that I have if the real estate market was to crash without having equity in those properties. And so it's like, there is a point in time where you break through that. And so for me, my real estate business is how I survive. I reinvest every penny from my investments over and over and over and over and over again. And I will find more money for those. But with my real estate business, I need to make sure that I'm going to keep a roof over my head, and I'm going to continue to invest. So what I've set up now is profit first allocations. I don't know if you guys have like a files document or anything, but I can happily share it if you guys have something attached to the podcast. And this like profit first allocation model that I used a couple of years ago. And the book Profit First is brilliant for it, where you'll set up 4 bank accounts. And so I have this profit first allocation model where if I do a deal or some team member does a deal, it goes into this funnel and then into these 4 bank accounts or these other 4 bank accounts. So I had 8 bank accounts, 4 for my business and 4 for myself. And I allocated a certain percentage. So I put a certain percentage for taxes. So I never was behind on that. I put a certain percentage of profit. Those were lower numbers at that point. I put a little bit more for my owner's compensation. That was how I lived and survived. And then I had operating expenses. And so I would only spend what was in those accounts on my personal stuff. Whereas with real estate investments, as long as the numbers worked, as long as I could make a cash flow work, or as long as I was below 70% of after repair value, I'd continue to borrow. And so I would borrow more debt as long as I was within my boundaries and my range of what I had to do. So instead of being the one that funds the rentals or funds the purchases, I would find other capital and I'd pay a premium for it. Because if I can take 10% money, but I can make 20% money on it, I'll do it all day long. And if you could guarantee yourself that you're going to double your money, but you borrowed from something, you do it over and over again, as long as you can guarantee it. So for me, the guarantee is that I'm going to commit to consistently being successful in it. And I'm going to guarantee it, because the best bet that you can ever make is a bet that you make on yourself. And so I'm consistently doing that. And that was something that was told to me years and years ago. The best bet you can ever make is a bet that you make on yourself. So go ahead, make a bet on yourself if you're serious. And so I do. And so everything I've gone into, whether it be real estate investments or it be this apartment building or go into a joint venture partnership where I'm like, yeah, I'll be the active partner. It's buying the brokerage. Like whatever it is, I know that I'll move forward and make that deal and sign off on that paperwork, knowing that the only person that can fail at that is me getting in my own way and me stopping myself mentally, because I know that I have the ability to do it. I know I can find the resources to do it. And the only thing that can stop me is my mindset.
Amazing. Well, I know that you have to go, but ultimately, Dylan, having you in our world is just crazy, because you always push us to bigger limits. You're the reason why a lot of the stuff has, evolved around us. And it's great to see you continue to grow and ultimately get to learn from you every single day. So thank you for coming on and sharing your story again. We'll have to do another recap in another 2 years and see where you're at, which I'm sure is going to be even higher. And any last words you want to leave us with before you have to go?
Well, I've been challenged recently by a couple of partners that I need to put a jet on like my immediate thing because it makes financial sense. So maybe 2 years from now, we'll record a live episode on a jet flying somewhere fun and exciting.
That sounds great.
No, but I think going back to that quote, if I was to leave with anything, is like, if you're serious about growth, you're serious about leadership, you're serious about developing yourself and others around you, the best bet you can ever make is the bet you make on yourself. And keep that, replay it, look at it however you need to, write it down wherever you need to, and consistently push yourself, because you are the only person that has control of yourself. So if you have control of it, then you're the one that can mentally overcome it and achieve whatever you want to achieve.